Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to go through and have everybody introduce themselves. Nairi, let's start with you.
Sure. I'm Nairi Hollingsworth. I'm Senior Manager for Collaboration and Productivity Technology at Granger. Thank you for having me here. Um, yeah, what else do you want to know?
What's your background in?
Sure. So I've been in the industry about 20 something years, mainly on the leadership the past 15. So I'm not nearly as smart as I used to be. But I also have I'm also on the VIXA board of directors, and so I help with some of those strategic activities to keep this association going and going strong and fun and interesting as we navigate these challenges that we have collectively in the ecosystem.
I think that's a lie, and you get smarter every year, which is why we keep having you back. Next up, we have Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Watts. I'm the Senior Manager of Video and Events at AMD. I am based out of Austin, Texas. I've been in the industry for about 28 years, and every time I say that, I feel like I get more gray hairs as I discuss it. I've spent the last several years of my career working for large tech companies. So I've worked for Google, Facebook, Apple, and now AMD, doing largely the same thing, the building programs around the holistic delivery of collaboration solutions for my users. So it is something that I truly enjoy, and I will contest what Nairi said. I'm probably the dumbest person in this room. Um, when I saw who was joining, I was pretty sure y'all hired me for comedic relief. So I will try and add value to this, but please be advised that out of everyone on this space, I am here just to have a good time.
Don't pay any attention to any of them. They're all fabulous experts, which is why they're here. Next up, we have Jody.
Hello, I'm Jody McLean. I'm the engineering manager, or one of the engineering managers at Diversified. I've been in the industry for 18 years. I have a field and project management background, and then I've been doing design and design engineering and management recently, but design for like the last five or so years. So it's been good.
Yay, thanks for joining us. Last but not least, we have Jeremy.
Jeremy Caldera, I'm the Executive Vice President at Pearl Technology in Central Illinois, in Peoria, and AV's my background for the past 20 plus years, like everyone else here on the call. So my degree is in audio and acoustics, so I'm excited about this one.
Nice.
One of these other ones I get pulled into is not really my passion, but this one is, so it's a good one.
Yay, well, let's get started. I'm going to kick things off with a very broad question, and anyone can start. In your opinion, what constitutes the ultimate meeting room audio experience?
So I have one because I actually was asked this question by someone at my company because we had a discussion much like this for my end users. One of the things we categorize in general, and this has been my mantra for a long time, is the ultimate audio experience in a conference room should support the frictionless engagement of the people in the space. And that encompasses a lot of things. That encompasses to ensure that, from an intelligibility standpoint, the room registers at least 20 dB above the ambient noise floor, all the things that go into that. But overall, it should support the experience, right? An ultimate audio experience is one of those things that when it works appropriately, you hardly know it's there. It allows people to participate, have full equity in the space that they're in, as well as the folks that are on the far side, and also provides the value that we're expecting out of the systems that we drive. So it's a broad question with a broad answer, but we try and do that here, at least in larger tech spaces, so that it's the easiest, most efficient, most frictionless engagement experience we have in a conference room.
I think it's the most important part of any meeting is the audio. Actually, you can conduct a meeting without video. You can't conduct a meeting without audio, right? So anything we can do to improve comprehension, intelligibility, it's all going to elevate that user experience, and it's going to make, it's going to be the ultimate for any conference room. It's just very crystal clear audio that doesn't drop, doesn't have any issues. And like I said, just overall improves that just comprehension of all the meeting participants. That to me, that's the most critical thing. From there, it's all just kind of icing on the cake. Right?
Yeah, and I would say for me, it's the ultimate audio experience in a conference room is one that works. And we want everything to be great. I have been doing this, building systems and supporting systems for the better part of the past 20 years. I haven't stepped foot in the perfect room yet. They're all going to have their different set of issues, and the best thing you can do is kind of control what you can control, and to Justin's point, just deliver as much of a frictionless experience as you possibly can.
And I think that, equity in conferencing has been a big factor for bringing people together. And I think that from an audio perspective, having equity is also important for having the ultimate audio experience. Too often that are we dealing with environmental impacts, as well as just everybody's in a different place. So their environment's different, their hardware is different. Finding an audio experience where we feel like we're in the same room and we're at the same level, and it's intelligible. So that would be the ultimate audio experience.
So the subject we can't seem to stop talking about since COVID is hybrid work. Can you share a little bit about some of the impact of hybrid work environments on meeting room audio requirements, kind of what's changed in the last few years?
Well, I can tell you, for me, it's exposed how poorly we've done from an architectural standpoint in building out these commercial office spaces. And I don't think anybody's immune.
Say it louder for the folks in the back, please.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's immune to it. I've been in 3 different organizations since 2019. All of them have their challenges. All of them are in somewhat older buildings, and it's just a nightmare to because the audio, because the microphone technology these days is so good. It has really exposed how bad the acoustics in these rooms are. And a lot of that, people look to me to kind of fix it with technology, and I can't. I'm always going back to them. It's like, we got to do something about the room before I can fix anything.
I'll tell you though, I'll say 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, the architect would typically always win, right? When they were making any kind of decisions, and audio was kind of an afterthought. We were brought in at the very end. We just had to make it work. Like you said, get the technology to fix the problem, which is not, you can't fix acoustics with technology, right? So, but what the pandemic has brought in these new hybrid work environments is kind of brought AV to the forefront of thought now. I'm seeing that a lot more. It's still an afterthought for many people, but more and more I'm seeing it now thought about much earlier, which is fantastic, because now we can start to get involved with those architects and whoever else is designing the furniture, and hey, marble tile is a terrible idea with glass walls. This is why, and that experience that everyone else is also having, those architects and those interior designers are having themselves when they're participating in their own hybrid meetings, is kind of solidifying that for us, right? Because now they've experienced it firsthand, where that was never the case in the past.
And I would also say that I think we all agree that it's raised the bar, right? For room construction, for technology, that kind of thing. But also it's raised the bar for us as an industry, right? Because we used to get by on what was good enough for a long time. I mean, let's be all fair. Nairi made an amazing point that it pointed out the fact that we design rooms poorly. We design them because they look cool, not because they function well. That's a huge thing. But also for us, it's caused us to have to raise what we do to that next level. And that's just to get us to a standard rate of what I consider, that frictionless intelligibility for a space to be able to conduct a regular meeting. So we really can't say that it's the room anymore or whatever. We find ways to make that work, right? And to your point, I've been engaged a lot earlier on projects than I've ever been since we're getting into this space, because people are now recognizing the value of what we do. And we're not just the sheetrockers, right? We're not just the last trade in the room. One of the things that I joke about from COVID and being hybrid and whatnot is, prior to COVID, if my mom asked me what I did for a living, I would tell her, oh, TVs, I set the clock on the VCR, that kind of thing. Now, if someone asks, I say, hey, Zoom? Yeah, I do Zoom. And there's a whole other slew of questions. So we're no longer the man behind the curtain. We are the person in the front of the room providing a business critical service. And so if anything, it's created a bar that goes up every single day as the hybrid environment changes.
I also think it's how we've looked at hardware as well. In hybrid work, we've seen people go working from home and USB devices and going into digital audio. We're forced to integrate differently as well compared to the past, where we've had dedicated conference systems and conference rooms. Now we're looking at more simplified spaces that are touch and go hotel desks or huddle spaces. For those that are hybrid, they come into the office or they're working from home, and they're used to using technologies that are more personal device centric. And it's just forced us to look at USB technologies and integrations, and how we integrate that in systems and hardware these days too.
And to Jody's point, it's pointing out that all those things are not created equal, because everyone who's access to a buydiscountproducts.com website has probably gotten something that has landed in your environment that you've got a ticket about at some point in time, trying to explain why was this user experience so terrible. Well, because they used the $2 on sale microphone that they found to be something, whatever. It's a huge thing. And Jody, I think you touched on something that we could spend another hour on as well. If you haven't tell, my eye twitch changes eyes when I hear about this one, because it's just one of those things like you're killing me. Please stop. So.
And Jeremy, you kind of led into my next question. You started talking about this a little bit. A building's construction can obviously have a huge impact on audio. How do you handle situations where a room was designed without any consideration for acoustics, like you were talking about a conference room with glass walls and a marble floor?
Well, like he was saying earlier, the technology has progressed in such a way that we can get by with some of these spaces, because a lot of times we're not allowed to change any of these things. If they're doing any kind of remodeling, we can try to have some say into what's happening, or, maybe we can talk them into some kind of acoustical treatment, whether it's on the walls or in the ceiling, or changing out drop tile, or whatever we can do to try and improve the overall characteristics of an existing space. But that's still incredibly difficult. And again, the technology helps us with that. But it's never going to be equitable, right, to the meeting room next door, which is now all those considerations have been brought into it. But what I find is those existing spaces that are difficult and challenging end up getting a remodel at some point, because as they expand and they do these other rooms and they see that meeting equity, they see that the environment creates such a great, it fosters that intelligibility and that clarity, then no one wants to use that other room because it's just impossible to hear or understand anybody. So it kind of forces that to be a budgetary concern for architectural stuff. So it's not ideal, but I mean, we all have to deal with it. So.
And along with that, I mean, there does come a point where you can't, so great example. I've done work in spaces that are historical buildings. I'm pretty sure, Nairi, you've probably seen some of those as well, depending upon what you've seen in your past. You have to roll with it sometimes. It's not the best solution. I would say that technology has gotten incrementally better to help us adapt and overcome in those scenarios. But there also comes a segment which it's kind of the part of the job that we wind up doing a lot of times, is resetting user expectations and letting them know, hey, by the way, when you chose to put a hint cut terrazzo ceiling in this conference room, you did yourself no favors. And whoever told you it was a good idea also did you no favors. So we have to find ways to make that work. I would say technology does have a part to play in that and can help us, as we've all said, pivot and have some adjustment points there. But there is a ceiling to that.
There's limitations to everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't bend as much as we'd like to. You can't bend the laws of physics. I don't care how much Star Trek you watch. So you do have to find ways to make it palatable for your user.
Yeah, and I often find when I have these conversations with people, just trying to understand the kind of how did we get here when you got an architecturally deficient space, it usually boils down to, a historic decision when the space was originally constructed, and very few of these spaces have been constructed in the past 5 years for obvious reasons. So you go back 5-6 years before the pandemic, when everybody was expected to be in the office, we really didn't care about the other person on the far end of the call. And so, you made design choices that fit that assumption. And now that has been flipped and reversed, this hybrid piece has got a lot of corporate real estate professionals scratching their head at how to overcome that, because it is really, in a lot of ways, it's existential for that business, but also for the justification for commercial office space. because you got employees that are like, well, I got a better experience than I had at home than I would have in the office. So why would I come into the office? And so, the good news is to Justin's earlier point, they're bringing us into the conversation to help facilitate that and help fix some of the prior wrongs, but we still got a long ways to go.
Employee satisfaction. I mean, they're gonna buy. It's user buy-in, right? If they get that, they're going to be more productive. They're going to be happier. It's going to be good all around. And audio is, like you said, critical to that. And so is that environment that you're building in all those spaces. So.
Well, and looking back to COVID, look at how many times companies gave people money to invest in their home office setup to make it something that they could, participate in meetings for a long period of time. So, we haven't touched these rooms in quite some time. We're just getting ramped back up into those spaces. We're trying to find what makes sense. And to Nyrie's point, some of these folks have better setups at home than they do at the office. I mean, I've seen some of them. I'd like to go work out of their home office because it's way better than my desk. Trust me. So it's just one of those things that, man, it's that weird circle we have to go in. Yes, please build this awesome home setup, but please come use this technology we put in the building in 1998. They don't add up.
Let's chat a little bit specifically about equipment. What do different types of microphones, or how do different types of microphones impact audio quality? And how do you choose which type to implement?
That's a loaded question.
I was going to say.
That's why you guys are the experts.
There's a lot to unpack there. There's like 2 hours of a webinar we can do.
Yeah. I say at a high level, there's a lot of, there are several ways to solve problems in conference rooms, right? We've seen a huge move forward or huge leaps forward in the creation of ceiling mounted, ceiling installed, beam forming array microphones that can do a myriad of things.
That sound better than they used to.
They sound way better than they used to. Table mic technology has gotten way better than it used to as well. There are huge advances there. One of the things I would say, and it goes back to something that we've all touched on here, is it really depends on the use case and what your users are expecting. If you build an executive style boardroom and load it with table mics, the first thing they do when they walk in is drop cups and papers and cover mics up and everything. You kind of defeated the purpose of installing a conference room. It all really goes back to kind of that user fit and finish and look and feel that you need to deploy to ensure you have a ubiquitous use case for everyone. Right. But one thing I will say about this is, again, going back to the technology not solving all your problems, know what you're deploying before you put it into space, and also do it correctly. Right. There are some parts and smarts to go into deploying a beamforming microphone in a ceiling to ensure that you're not getting one of the lobes going off to the buffet service and someone's clanking plates and that kind of thing, to actually get the value out of what you're doing. So I would say one of the first thing to do is do your research to show what you're going to put in those places. And second, realize that more doesn't always equal better. Right. So if you're going to put, a ceiling microphone in a room and there's a use case to have a belt pack and a couple of stick mics at the front of the room, and you've got this over here and that over there, realize all those receptors of acoustic energy at some point in time, laws of physics, are going to intersect and make your life miserable. So you can't just throw, buckets at the box to try and make it work. There is some math that has to go into it. But I will say, to Jeremy's point, it's gotten a lot better since we started to put these things in the ceilings a long time ago, right? There's some great value there.
And like you said, Justin, it's really based on use case and what is the best position for those microphones. It's not just how much area do I want to cover or how many people are going to be talking. It's where is that person going to be presenting from? What is the placement of the table in the space? How dynamic do we need the microphone to be? So there's a lot that goes into the microphone choice, but we also need to look at placement, not just we'd like to have it not on the table, but maybe it has to go in a certain place for a certain application to be optimized. So definitely need to put a lot of planning into, what is the actual use case and expectations and where are those people going to be?
So on the flip side, what about speakers and soundbars? How are they impacting audio quality, and how do you choose which type to implement?
Yeah, soundbars.
Everybody's got one.
Again, it's that thing, right? I mean, everybody has a soundbar at home, or at least lots of folks have soundbars at home, and so that's something that they realize that, hey, that's where the sound comes from, and 9 times out of 10, there's a mic in there as well, right? Um,
They serve a
my rule of
purpose.
thumb, they
They,
do,
they
but
fit a
they serve,
case. The,
but
the
they don't solve everything.
Right, that's the problem that I have is you get people who are used to their sound bars or their all-in-ones in a room that's no bigger than my office, and then they go into a massive room that seats 40 people, and they want to put a sound bar with an all-in-one camera at the front of the room and expect that, talk about equitable audio, right? That's not even going to be close to what you're going to get, right? And the expectation, and that goes back to what you were saying, Justin, right? Setting expectation with clients and understanding the user need, and explaining to them why they can't put a soundbar necessarily everywhere, is critical, right? I mean, we can do this all day long. I mean, speaker quality obviously is going to go hand in hand with microphones, and you can have speakers placed on walls and ceilings. You can have sound bars, but again, it comes down to what is the specific application that we're talking about? What's the need?
Yeah. And it goes back to what Jody said earlier, understand use case, understand what goes into it. I mean, Nairi, you work at a interesting component because you do a lot of the stuff yourself. I mean, I'm assuming that y'all dig into that stuff all day long. I mean, how often do y'all see soundbars as the solution when it comes to your classroom environments, your collaboration environments?
Oh, well, collaboration, the smaller spaces, to Jeremy's point, they definitely, that's the use case and that's the sweet spot for them. And they serve that very nicely because that is the majority of our spaces. It's those kind of 4 to 7 person huddle spaces, to where you don't need a whole lot to be effective there. We've done a really good job of keeping those out of our larger spaces and doing the right thing there. Because we definitely, like, we know that, and in a lot of ways those aren't the right applications for those larger spaces. But to your point, we have to sell it internally to justify the additional expense. And I'll give you a quick story. And this was 2014, 15, 16, it's 2017. I was asked to outfit my then CEO's office. So the size of that office was basically looked like a conference room. So, we spec'd out a fully integrated kit in there with table microphones, so forth and so on. CFO says, well, why can't we do this soundbar like solution? And I had to explain to him that it's like, yeah, your office might be fitting for that. But if I put that in his office, the closest person to it is 20 feet away. Like, and you're going to complain about it. And of course, this is the boss's office. I only get one bite at this apple, and so I'm just not doing that. And it got all the way up to my bosses, the CIO. We actually had to sit down with the CFO and explain this to him. And once we did that, it was like, oh, let's show it to him on the drawings. Everything was like, oh, okay, yeah, approved. Didn't have any issues after that. But how many times, how many organizations, how many corporations are there out there that aren't able to win that battle and convince executive leadership to do the right thing? Because eventually you're going to feel the complaints about it, but getting it right up front, that's a tall task, but it requires a different set of skills to navigate that and make sure that you set yourself up and your respective teams up for success.
Yeah, and looking at speakers in general, I mean, again, it goes back to the rule of thumb. More is not always better, right? You can put too much acoustical energy into a space to where it becomes just untenable, especially if it's got the glass wall on the side. And so that's one of the things that we kind of walk the line with as well, is trying to find that sweet spot of, okay, given the size of the room, construction, all the components, how are we going to do this? And I think we've all kind of said the same thing at this point in time, is it really depends on that use case and what you're solving for, problematically speaking. It's not just throwing something on the wall and hoping it's going to work.
And I know you kind of touched on this, but I know you'd love to take a question from your friend Chuck. He wants to know how you deal with soundbars in a long room.
Well, I mean, so I just add more. Yeah, we just put 2 or 3 in there. We chain them together. Hopefully it's 70 volt. No. When it comes to soundbars in a long room, it really does become, again, that balancing act. I actually have some of those in my spaces. And the way we've built that is we actually add speakers towards the back to give us fill so that we have a spacing in there. If the room is long enough, depending upon the size, which most of mine aren't, what is built into our standards, we do have delay that can occur to give us the ability to pull that through. But really, I'm not doing that with a soundbar in the front to begin with. My goal is, again, from that frictionless experience from a commissioning perspective, is I ensure that once we've built it, content in the room reaches that 20 plus dB over ambient noise floor, so we're covered. And so I will stage speakers in the back. I will, if I have a long and narrow enough room, and I think it's going to cause impact, I go back to my users and let them know, hey, this is not going to work the way you want it to. We need to do X, and we will fill in with other speakers to ensure that we have adequate coverage. But again, it goes back to that use case and discussion points, right? You can put a soundbar in a long, narrow bowling alley of a room and crank it up, and the users at the front of the room at the Rolling Stones concert, and the users at the back of the room at the Kenny G concert, right? It's two different user experiences. So it's all about that use case and understanding what the end result should be.
I will say that there's a number of manufacturers out there now, though, that have that all-in-one solution, but still allow you to plug in a USB peripheral of some kind. So, for example, instead of using the microphone built into the soundbar, I can still put a ceiling mic in that covers a much bigger area and still bring that into the soundbar with all the echo cancellation we need. So seeing that kind of flexibility is promising, and I think that it's only going to improve and get better long term. Now, it's not going to fix the problem of the blaring of the speakers to the people in the front of the room, but if we're seeing it with microphones, maybe we'll start seeing that with the ability to now send audio out. Who knows where that's going to go, but I could see that happening.
Well, I mean, if you pulled everything into a Dante reference, it wouldn't matter, right? You could send everything out through Dante and use PoE speakers. And
that's why I think it's possible to do it. I'm not seeing it as prevalent right now, but the potential there is for it, and there's also potential for it to be better, right? Much better as that progresses. So
yeah, I agree.
So moving on a little bit, audio is just one half of AV. How do you ensure that audio equipment is properly integrated with video conferencing systems?
Well, the all-in-ones do a really good job of that. Right? There's not much to do there, but
we do that? Is that a thing? Do we care about the video on the screen?
Those larger spaces like Justin was talking about earlier. I mean, there's the buzzword equity, right? You want audio equity everywhere. So if we want to get that even sound quality throughout the space, without overdoing it, if you will, with too many speakers and things, we need to make sure there's that integration back end, right? So although it may seem simpler for the users, we want to make that user experience really good for everybody. It can be complex on the back end, and that's where I think the expertise of the integrator comes in ensuring that you're getting proper acoustic echo cancellation, proper routing of everything, and just that kind of, that's the word, integration, right? Of that gear is going to be critical. So, and
like Jeremy said, the audio integration, looking at it from a more digital perspective, digital audio allows us to integrate with multiple manufacturer devices. And when we're doing these spaces for equity for audio, I think that we're going to, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. But no, I'm just, from a digital perspective, not only are we tracking like beamforming microphones, tracking people, but pairing that up with cameras as well. That's something that we're starting to see to build that equity that Jeremy's talking about from a video perspective, getting the individual box and then lining up those microphones with those individuals. So.
Yeah, and Megan, I would say that earlier in my career, that was one of the hardest things to do. However, now, Zoom, Teams, those are really the only two that really matter. They do a really good job in their cloud of fixing a lot of the deficiencies that they see coming out of the rooms with the noise suppression that they're able to do. Like, I'm frequently on a call, and my dog will start barking at someone in the window over here, and I'm like panicking, trying to get to my mute button, and people are like, what are you talking about? They can't hear him at all. Yeah. And he's right here next to a really good microphone. And that's all Teams that's taking care of that and Xing that out of the media stream. Where his barking is bothering me because I can't hear them, more so than them hearing them on the call. And again, that's one of the things that is only gonna get better as those video platform manufacturers get smart about just trying to account for all of the deficiencies that they would encounter in someone's space.
Well, and it's funny we say this, but the human brain is currently, as AI grows, but the human brain is currently the most efficient difference engine on Earth. That means your brain is designed to find differences. It goes back to, bygone eras in which we were, hunting for our food and whatnot. That difference was a traction in your fight or flight mentality as you did things. Your brain, for lack of a better term, picks things apart. And so when the audio doesn't match the video, it is probably the most unnerving experience in any environment, right? Even goes past Zoom and Teams at this point in time, or pick your collaboration suite going forward. It goes all the way down to you're sitting in a room and you're watching a video and the audio is just a click too far or too slow when it comes to that, right? And as Nairi mentioned, back in the day, this was like the problem, right? I started doing video conferencing back when you're mixing BR lines together to try and, get a call out. And that was an atrocious experience when it came to lip sync because, we're sitting there trying to rely on this brand new thing called, I think back then one of the ones that we used was called the Siren codec that actually went through and broke down audio to ensure that it aligned with the video and whatnot. When it comes to that, I mean, again, the collaboration technology companies, the platforms themselves have invested millions of dollars in ensuring that the algorithms that line everything up, headers and points of contact for video and audio, are so pristine. But then how do you take it to your conference room? What if you're not doing a video call? What if you're just doing something in a room that requires in-room full motion video or in-room IMAG with audio as well? We have to keep that factor forefront because as we're doing that, that could then be integrated into the collaboration environment and create all the things that we used to see back in the day that we've eliminated. So they do a fantastic job, but there is some onus on us to still build quality systems so that we're not interjecting more noise into that scenario.
For sure.
So what about people that are not so tech savvy, like your average employee? How do you ensure that the conferencing audio is easy to use for them?
Well, like I was saying earlier, like a lot of the platforms that are out there now are actually doing that work for us. At the end of the day, you gotta, your number one challenge, at least for me, is controlling the user interface and their touch points and what they actually have to touch, within that system. And my holy grail, and I'm still chasing this white whale, but I think we'll get there, is really that zero touch experience where people just walk in, sit down and have a meeting, and everything kind of automatically adjusts and tunes itself to ensure an amazing experience. And we're really, really getting close there.
That's what I was going to say. Is I think we're almost there.
Yeah. We're really getting close, which is exciting and scary at the same time. Because you're always going to have those cases where it something gets thrown off a little bit and it doesn't quite work right. And then that's when the not tech savvy user is going to say, nothing ever works, and it's really just a click off here or there, or some conditions that the system's expecting are just no longer true. And so you deal with that. That's why folks like me have jobs. But I'm really excited about what we're able to do with software and AI now to enable that to be kind of seamless and transparent to the end user.
Right, and there's two parts to that, right? So first off, commissioning can save a lot of that, because if you commission the room correctly when you land it, you have standards around how you commission it, and you understand what's intelligible and is an exceptional fidelity experience in your conference rooms from an audio standpoint. You shouldn't have to have a whole lot of human automation, the folks going in and doing the automation for you on the touch panel to make things work, right? Like I currently, I'm a champion of the one touch to join, right? As much as we can distill down into a single touch point to join a meeting. Granted, I would love to be in a place where I can walk in and just voila, it knows me and things come up, outside of even doing things like scanning my badge and an RFID or an NFC reader, even beyond that, right? Let's find a way to Nairi, I agree with you. My nerdvana is to be able to walk into a conference room and it just kicks off and I'm good to go, right?
I had manufacturers selling me that idea 10 years ago, though, right? I've never seen it
but again,
implemented. But
I mean, we're not there.
no,
Even 10 years ago, we weren't there.
It's
We're close.
I'll
We're
believe
very
it now.
close. We're very close. But
What are
it's
we
just
what are we missing to get there, in your opinion?
everything.
I wouldn't say everything, because the challenge had always been fundamentally that identity piece. Well, if you're using Teams, Microsoft and MTRs are now counting your face. So now Microsoft, and you can register your face and your voice with Microsoft now. And so they know exactly who you are when you walk in that room. They know
AI
exactly
is
what's
gonna
on
get
your
us there.
calendar. They
Well,
know,
Yeah.
depending on
that's
what technologies you might have in the building, they might actually be able to geolocate you in that
Yeah.
building. And
but
so with
Jeremy,
all of those things that they have, it can be done. There's a lot of privacy and governance around that. I think that's the biggest missing piece is just getting that straight, because not everybody is comfortable with the fact that Microsoft knows their face and their voice and all of those things. But I definitely see that changing as we get smarter about protecting that data. But we're not as far away from it as you might think.
well, so Jeremy, to quick thing though, that's not AI. That's literally just macro recognition, right? That's
Yeah,
not AI at that point in
but we're
time.
going to start seeing some intelligence
We
when it comes
will,
to recognition.
but the
Yes.
catch is we have to be consistent for it to work, right? There has to be a standard methodology behind deployment. And I mean, most companies have a thing called like IAM, identity and access management, which is what Nairi you just described, is all of the biometrics around how you interact with company systems, right? And so realistically speaking, if we had a way to more effectively integrate into those practices, I could see exactly what you're saying happen tomorrow, right? Because those already exist. It's already a current practice in most companies.
Getting
But we have to,
standards is impossible sometimes.
well, and that's the thing though, right? We
Yeah.
have to be consistent in how we do this
Mhm.
because,
Yeah, that's
X supplier does it this way with these folks into this
Yeah.
program. Y supplier does it this way with these
Yep.
folks into this program.
That's what's
If we
going to
could,
hinder the speed on any of this is all of that. And to your point, what's really interesting that you brought this up, because I just thought about this because I live in Illinois. In Illinois, you can't have any of that facial recognition stuff in use with Teams, and there's
Yep,
several other
yep.
states that are like that as well. And so I think that compliance kind of stuff is also going to throw a major, monkey wrench
Sure.
and roadblock into this whole thing, right? It's just going to be, it's going to prevent us from kind of taking that next step, if you will, or it's going to let people take the next step while leaving, people who live in my state in the dust, right? Not being able to turn on these features of the software platform. So,
but the point, in a lot of ways, we're not talking about a technology problem here. We're talking about a privacy and governance and a regulatory problem, because essentially the technology is already there. It's just a matter of getting the laws in place and the rules in place to where we can actually turn it on and leverage it for
what's
some of the
interesting
things that
though
we
is
would like to have.
years ago, I never would have thought that the conversation we would be having wouldn't be, I never thought the conversation would be, the technology's here. It's now a government and compliance issue, right?
Right.
Weird that's
Yep.
actually a part of our everyday conversation when it comes to this stuff to me. So,
Yep.
well, Jody, what do you see? Because I mean, I know you've probably seen tons of this stuff and different requests from customers and whatnot. Is this something that Diversified digs into on a regular basis?
In terms of compliance and privacy for facial recognition, or just
being asked to integrate that, walk into a conference room and thing just magically work experience. I call it the Avengers syndrome because back in the day, I had
Right.
an executive watch the Avengers and walk in and want a Tony Stark TV tomorrow kind of thing. So
Right. I mean, we do have some clients that have high expectations for, that user experience. I personally have not worked on any of those projects to speak to like how those go, or what those expectations are. But, one of the interesting things I saw was Microsoft talking about immersive spaces as well, those 3D conference rooms and audio boundaries and things like that. And I think those are all tools, like you guys are saying, there's technology that would support it, right? It's just getting there, and creating that new experience. And I think everybody's going to have a different take on how that should be built, right, from an integrator perspective and building around those client expectations. And it is definitely forcing us to think differently about what our clients' needs are and how they want to experience conferencing.
So we've been talking about the different kind of privacy needs in AI, but in terms of new technology, how is AI being used to improve meeting room audio experiences?
Oh man, that's one of the things. So, I mean, one thing I've seen, and it really kind of depends what you classify as AI, because a lot of companies will say it's AI, and it's basically actually an enhanced macro component
Mhm.
running in the background.
Yep.
But AI analytics for conference room use and applicability, so user experience, that kind of thing, being able to trend those things for you and actually analyze the data and actually sample what's coming in, give you readout coming out, but also uh, one of the things that I've heard, I've not seen it put into practice, but I've heard it's something that we could expect for the future is AI sampling of spaces and being able to help you determine what the optimal audio experience should be, right? Because that goes beyond macros at that point in time, because you're adding more variables than a macro can dig into. Back in the day, Sony used to have a plugin for a lot of different components, but we were digging into reverb for conference halls and that kind of thing. They had a system they would send out, and it would sample all the great conference rooms or all the great conference music halls and whatnot across the globe. And there used to be plugin modules that you could use to actually replicate that room, right? That was just macros pulling down data and putting it into a sample set. It couldn't give you the recommendations on how to fix the room. I couldn't give you the data on how you would build the space or how to improve the space or what to do X, Y, and Z wise. From an audio perspective, it's one of those things where audio is still one of those largely arbitrary components in our universe, right? We have a set of guidelines around what we say. This is a scale for intelligibility. We have systems out there like AV 9000 that give us an entire breakdown as to what audio should be in a conference room based upon performance standards. But that literally changes from user to user, because no two people can be considered like that unique standard observer like we can for video, just due to experiences. Like right now, the tinnitus in my ears is driving me nuts, right? Because of a lot of reasons, but most of it involves not wearing earplugs in very loud concerts. But that affects my listening experience. I'm aware of it. And so whenever I'm commissioning a room, I have someone kind of come by and give me an extra set of ears. Audio is still completely arbitrary, because we're basing it upon we can use levels and give us data, but what sounds good to me, to a user in the room, may not sound good to the next user, right? So bridging that gap from an AI perspective is going to be huge, because if we can provide that nominal set of build perspective around everyone in that space, we can really get somewhere. Now, is it going to happen like tomorrow? Probably not, because again, there's a whole lot of variables when it comes to something like that. But again, it's still one of those things where I think there's room for improvement, because I mean, it's one of the things that we, like, and Irie said, we do it for a living, right? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't a need to improve the space.
Yeah, and I've seen products and technologies out there, particularly using AI to enhance the meeting transcripts and be able to identify individuals in a large conferencing space, and give that individual attribution when you go back and look at a meeting transcript. I think that is a lot cooler than people are giving it credit for. I don't think most people are really using it, because it's really just now becoming generally available within the past few weeks. But that's going to be huge, because when you start to build up that data set, and whereas I would say even 5 years ago, most people recording meetings or even doing an automated transcript using captioning, not a whole lot of people were doing it. And now I'm finding it's almost the exact opposite. They're almost always being recorded. There's always some level of an automated transcript, if not just using captioning. And nobody's really going and cleaning up and destroying that data. And so now you got all these data sets with your meetings and things of that nature, that we actually have to think about differently from from a privacy and a data retention perspective, that we didn't have to worry about before. So I would say from a AI standpoint, it's introducing different data sets that we historically, probably from an AV perspective, didn't really have to worry about before. And now we've got to have some deeper conversations with information security to ensure that at a certain point this stuff gets destroyed, it's undiscoverable, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, retention policy goes a long way when between where we used to store tapes versus restoring digital data, right? So
What other innovations are on the horizon that you think could further enhance meeting room audio experiences?
Well, it's interesting because it's audio, but it's not audio. You talked a little bit earlier, Mary, about live captioning, right, which has been very impressive. I've been starting to see live translation.
Yep.
So international companies speak in English, comes out in French on the other end, right? It's that's going to be a super cool thing down the horizon for those larger companies. It's pretty impressive now. I can't even imagine where it's going to be, a couple of years from now. So,
I think one thing that's getting us like an advance for the future is going to be how we deploy it. One of the barriers, personally, again, don't get too mad. This is Justin's personal opinion. That and the $6 still won't buy you coffee at Starbucks. How we deploy is important, right? The efficiency of deployment and how we deploy is a barrier to entry for a lot of people when it comes to the audio environment, because a lot of folks, if it's a smaller company, may not be able to hire a person like Nairi or Jeremy or even, diversified Jody. They don't really need me. I'm just a custodian and I'm the comic relief here. But largely speaking, being able to deploy a system that works well right out of the box efficiently without a lot of pain point, without a lot of custom programming, without a lot of X, Y, and Z would be huge. Now, we all know the reason why these touch points are required, right? Because it takes a tuned ear and someone who's really dug into DSPs to do things like set EQs and I'm hoping they're not just Googling it and going to the YouTubes, but they may be, I don't know. But in general, we have some very smart folks who do this for a living, right? Bringing those smarts to the masses would be a huge thing for us, because then we're able to more efficiently deliver these products into the environment. And it goes beyond just pushing the button on the front of the device and hoping that it commissions the way it's supposed to based upon pings and stuff in the room that make the noise. It's also, when it may not be that. Now, granted, there's still going to be a place for us to come in and do those smart things, and it should be there. But raising that bar so that other folks can get in with, like, one touch to set up and easier to land these products in space is really going to drive adoption in the future and get us out of just slapping sound bars on the walls.
Yeah, and I would say just, technology, not from an electronic standpoint, but materials science and technology that'll, give us that acoustically sound glass that will help us deal with some of the architectural elements that we're fighting with technology,
That would be great.
Yeah.
So I had a great discussion with someone one day around the concept of acoustic glass, and the reason, and you said that, and I actually kind of blacked out for a second because I'm not sure if I want to have a flashback or faint. You're not wrong, right?
Right.
That's another thing, to Jeremy's point. They've been saying for like the last 10 to 15 years, it's supposed to exist to give us this great new thing, with, hey, let's replace all these glassable conference rooms with acoustic glass. Oh man, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? I mean, I might actually get some sleep, like get some actual acoustic glass with a space.
Absorbent awesome. Marble, those kinds of things, man. That would be awesome. That would make our lives so much easier.
Full Star Trek. Let's go transparent aluminum. All right,
yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's an option. Scotty said so.
Okay, let's get to some of the audience questions. First, a little fun one. Nairi Jason wants to know what song is on your music stand?
I've been working on All Provav, Charlie Parker tune. So.
Nice. What meeting room audio systems, how can meeting room audio systems be designed to accommodate users with hearing impairments?
Oh, that's a good one. And that's one of the things I think that we take for granted a lot of the time, because we assume everyone in a conference room is of the same nominal ability, right? There's really kind of two ways you can tackle that. One predominant way is to build in accessibility into the design itself. And there's a couple of different ways to get into that. There's things around assisted listing systems that have different varieties, from IR to, Shield FM sideband, that kind of thing, that are great for those solutions. Another way is to, from a process perspective, one of the things I've done in the past is I've actually built in disability packs for folks that join an organization. And so if you join and we as work with the team that does the assessment to see what you would need to more efficiently interact with a conference room, and we deliver that to you, so then you're in control of your own accessibility for a space, and you're not reliant on someone else to have to lean into those for you. I found both those work pretty well. I got a lot of great feedback from building those packs for others, so they're able to, again, take control of their own space and participate in ways that's more efficient and effective for them. But I really think it boils down to first understanding what you're solving for. Um, Again, like I mentioned previously, everyone has different acuity when it comes to hearing. Mine's impacted by things, Jeremy's impacted by things. It's all these different, variables in space. It's understanding what X you're trying to solve for to ensure that everyone has, again, that fully equitable experience in a space.
Does anybody have anything else to add? Or next question? Let's go next question. What are some of the common issues that occur during meetings, and how can you ensure that they're quickly resolved for people that aren't familiar with technology?
Oh man. My most common issue has nothing to do with the AV technology. It's always selecting the right device within Teams or Zoom, or I'd mention the others, but nobody says they're not worth mentioning. So getting into your computer settings, and that's my most common issue is, they'll hey, you can't, we can't hear you very well. It's because somebody under the table is trying to talk through a laptop microphone, or it's just crazy. But I think I train on that more than anything else. I don't know what you guys' experience are, because what I find is that a lot of the AV technology we're putting in, whether it's simple or even complex, there's enough foresight hopefully put into it that it really does work most all the time, unless there's something super critical like power failures or just something that just utterly failed, right? So for me, the user interaction has to do with the computer itself, and I mean, I help as much as I can, but it's a frustrating call to get that. It's like back in the day when every church out there would call you because they didn't know how to press function F7 to get their projector to turn on, right, or whatever it was. So we just got to get that commonality to those users that aren't that familiar with technology. And to the bright side of that, we're seeing more and more users understand that now.
Yep.
Versus 2 years ago, when it was, everybody was work remote. Now everybody's just kind of used to it, so they understand where to change those settings at. But that's the most complex part: understanding what are the settings on the touch panel, what are the settings on this thing, what are the settings on, and all those settings have to be coherent and work together. And we can't always necessarily make that flawless, but we try, right?
Well, I'd say, to your point, it depends on how complex the room is, right? For a pretty standard conference room, there are a couple of things that are always going to crop up. Interfacing the laptop into the system for content sharing and all those parts that go into that. Joining a call, if you don't have one touch to join or no touch to join, if you physically have to, interact human automation with the device to make it do something. But as that complexity goes up, the things change. The one thing that we do to resolve it as quickly as possible is, one, we have standards in deployment. So 98% of my fleet is the same conference no matter where you go. Same look, same feel, same smell, or it should be in the future as we're going through a refresh program. So we have the ability from a help desk perspective that when they call, they know exactly kind of where to go to. Speaking to AI, one of the things that we've worked on internally is we worked with an AI company to build a program into our ServiceNow ticketing system where it goes through, and the help agent, when they're taking a call from the customer, types in a few keywords, and it tells them the most likely solutions based upon AI's parsing of how the solution's been solved in the past. And so now they can take that knowledge plus what they know of the conference room based upon the layout they have, and boom, they have a pretty quick solution. And I mean, sometimes, it boils down to a white glove service, depending upon who is in the space and who you're trying to work with. We still have those in our environment, and I would argue that those probably aren't going to go away anytime soon,
Nope.
unless we all go back home. But in general, as long as there's people in a building that have a need to have a meeting brought online as quickly as humanly possible, there's no room for error, that kind of thing, we're still going to have the white glove service to actually engage and solve those as quickly and as efficiently as we can.
Yeah, and what I learned very early in my career is that the phrase "it doesn't work" and "I don't know how to use it" tended to be synonymous. And so really the best way, the most common issue that you typically run into these spaces, because to Jeremy's point, the tech is really good now. And so in 99% of the cases, it's going to work unless you lost a power brick or, something, just got fried, wonky, CrowdStrike released a
Network
software
change.
update, that
Network
thing.
change.
Other than that, it's really training. That's how you resolve those issues, is that you train people up front. And, when you commission a system, you make sure you get as many people as you possibly can to come sit down with you and learn how to use the system. And you keep doing that until people stop coming to your training sessions.
I like
So-
that one. You had two today that I'm going to use. That and architecturally deficient. Those are now on my list. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Jody and Jeremy, this question is for you. How does an integrator define good when trying to close out a project and hand off to the client? Like, the room may sound good, but how do you define that in a document?
It's very, it's not a subjective way to do that.
You should have done it before you got the project.
I mean,
Just saying.
I like to use metrics, right? So up front, when you're designing your system and we're working with the end users, we want to get a clear definition of what the user expectation is, what the end result of the system is going to be, and we want to try to make those as measurable as possible. So from a scientific standpoint, if you will, it's how loud is the system supposed to be, what kind of pickup coverage are you going to get, what kind of resolution are you going to see on the screen, anything that we have control of. And then at the end, I mean, we can go through and actually measure all of those things and print out a report that says, hey, here's what we were trying to do. Here's what we met. Systems closed, write the check, right? I mean, we can kind of just eliminate the guesswork out of it. Now, there's always some opinions of everybody as to what sounds good, what doesn't sound good. But anything we can do to try and quantify that is going to help.
I absolutely agree with everything that Jeremy just said. So, first off, client expectations for the space and what they're looking for, and making sure that that's clear, making sure we're meeting those requirements. But also the subjectivity of what sounds good to an individual, and identifying, what is it that doesn't meet that requirement and addressing that. Is it, a certain quality of the space that wasn't taken into consideration, okay, well, that's a separate thing, right? Or there's some reverberation going in the space. How do we address that specific problem to get it resolved quickly so that we can correct the room? And sometimes it's outside of expectation or something that's measurable, like Jeremy said, where you have to just work through with that client to get to that point, and make them happy and say, okay, well, this is something that we can do something about. This is something we cannot correct. And is it closed and write the check, or is it something that we need to address further and develop onto that solution or design? Because sometimes it does occur.
Awesome. I have so many more questions for you guys, but we are unfortunately out of time. This was such a fantastic discussion. Thanks to all of you for joining me. Jeremy, if people want to learn more about you, they want to connect with you or Pearl, where can they find that information?
Our website is pearltechnology.com. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the